Here is what happened in the most important recording studio in American history in the spring of 1954. An unknown 22-year-old Air Force veteran walked in off the street with a cheap guitar and two friends who could barely play their instruments and auditioned with gospel songs that Sam Phillips told him he could not sell. It should have ended there. Most stories like this one end there. The door closes, the aspiring musician goes back to selling appliances or working the night shift or doing whatever the life he was trying to escape required of him, and the world never knows what it missed. It did not end there. What happened instead, in the specific conversation between a desperate young man and the most important talent scout in American music, in the moment when the gospel songs were set aside and something else was reached for, in the sound that emerged when Luther Perkins' thumb hit the low strings of his guitar in a particular rhythm that nobody had ever heard before, is one of the most consequential creative accidents in American cultural history. Sam Phillips had already recorded Elvis Presley. He was looking for something else, not another Elvis, but something with the same quality of absolute originality, the same sense of a sound that had not previously existed and that could not be imitated because it was too specifically itself. He found it in Johnny Cash. But first, he had to say no. And Johnny Cash had to figure out what to do after the no. That moment, the no, and the response to it tells you everything about who Johnny Cash was and why everything that followed was possible. This is Episode 2, The Sun Sessions, the sound that changed American music and the pills that were quietly beginning to change Johnny Cash. Memphis in 1954 is the most musically fertile city in America, and it is fertile in the specific way of places where different musical traditions exist in close enough proximity that their cross-pollination is inevitable rather than deliberate. The blues of the Mississippi Delta has been moving up the river for decades. The music of Black America, born from the same cotton fields and the same hard labor and the same specific conditions of deprivation and survival that produced the white country and gospel traditions. Memphis sits at the point where these streams converge, where the juke joints on Beale Street and the country radio stations and the black church and the white church are all operating within blocks of each other, feeding off the same emotional vocabulary, even as they maintain the segregated social structures that the era requires. Sam Phillips understands this convergence better than anyone in the music business. He has been recording black artists at Sun Records since 1950, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, Ike Turner, and he has been asking himself, with the specific commercial intelligence of a man who understands both the music and the market, what would happen if a white artist could access the emotional directness of the blues? Not imitate it. Imitation produces nothing genuine, but genuinely feel it, genuinely express it, genuinely inhabit the same emotional territory from a different biographical position. He found the answer in Elvis Presley. Now Elvis is gone. RCA has bought his contract for the unimaginable sum of $35,000, and Sun Records is looking for the next thing. The studio itself is a physical space of extraordinary modesty relative to what it has produced. The building at 706 Union Avenue is a former radiator shop, small, unassuming, the kind of place that a person walking past would not look at twice. Inside, a single recording room, acoustic panels on the walls, a control room separated by a glass window, the basic technical equipment of a small independent operation run by a man whose genius is not in the equipment, but in the ear. Sam Phillips can hear what a recording will sound like before it exists. He can hear in a raw performance the specific qualities that the right production choices will reveal or conceal. He hears things that the performers themselves cannot hear because he is listening from outside the experience rather than inside it. This is what he is doing when Johnny Cash walks in. Johnny Cash makes his appointment and arrives at 706 Union Avenue in the spring of 1954 with Marshall Grant and Luther Perkins. Friends, not professional musicians, people whose instrumental abilities are limited and whose presence is as much about moral support as musical contribution. Luther plays guitar. Marshall plays bass. Neither of them has the technique that a professional recording session would require. What they have is availability and willingness, and in the context of a young man trying to get his foot in the door of an industry that has not asked for him, availability and willingness are sufficient. The audition begins with gospel. Johnny sings the songs that he has been singing since the Dias farmhouse, the music of Carrie Cash and the rural Southern church, the music that is the most direct expression of who he is and what he believes and where he came from. He sings them with the full force of the voice that the Air Force barracks in Germany confirmed was something real, the low-resonant instrument that carries gospel the way the land carries water, not performing the emotion, but being it. Sam Phillips listens. He is not moved in the way that the gospel songs are designed to move a listener. He is assessing with the cold analytical intelligence of a man who has been in rooms with genuine talent and knows the difference between a great performance and a commercially viable one. What the specific qualities of what he is hearing can be turned into. The gospel is genuine, the voice is extraordinary. The commercial problem is simple and specific. Gospel is a known quantity, an established market with established artists and established expectations, and what Sam Phillips is looking for is not a known quantity. He tells Johnny that gospel won't sell. He asks what else he has. The moment that follows is the one that determines everything. Johnny Cash does not leave. This seems like a small thing, and it is not. The music business runs on rejection, on the accumulated no's that separate the people who eventually find a door from the much larger number who accept the first closed door as the final answer. The specific quality required to hear no and remain in the room, to hear no and reach for something else rather than accepting the verdict and returning to the appliance sales route is not talent. It is the specific, difficult resilience of someone who has decided at a level below conscious choice that this is the thing and that the thing is going to happen. Johnny Cash decided this before he walked into 706 Union Avenue, and the no from Sam Phillips does not change the decision. It redirects it. He picks up his guitar and begins playing something different. Not gospel, not the formal repertoire he prepared, but the music that comes when the prepared material has been set aside, and what remains is the unfiltered expression of who the person actually is. He plays something driving and direct, the rhythm of the cotton fields and the train lines that cross the delta, the sound of a locomotive in the specific way that a young man who grew up beside the railroad in Dias, Arkansas, hears a locomotive as freedom, as escape, as the mechanical embodiment of going somewhere else. Luther Perkins begins playing along. His technique is limited, and the limitation produces something unexpected. Rather than the fluid, accomplished guitar work that a professional session musician would provide, Luther plays the only pattern he can consistently execute, a simple, driving boom-chicka-boom on the low strings that functions as both rhythm and bass line simultaneously. It is the sound of someone playing within their limitations so honestly that the limitations become the style. Sam Phillips hears it. He hears in the specific combination of the voice, the low, resonant, utterly unadorned instrument that carries everything without artifice, and the stripped-back guitar rhythm, a sound that does not exist anywhere else in the musical landscape of 1954. Not blues, not country, not gospel. Something that draws from all of them and belongs to none of them, that has the emotional directness of the blues and the narrative specificity of country and the moral weight of gospel, combined in a form that is entirely new. He asks them to do it again. They record "Hey Porter," a song Johnny wrote in the Air Force on the train ride home to the South after his discharge, about the specific emotion of a Southern man returning to the South and watching the landscape change as the train crosses the Mason-Dixon line. The song is not sophisticated. It is not technically complicated. It is the direct, honest expression of a specific feeling. The longing for home, the particular emotional charge of the South for someone who grew up in it and left it and is returning to it, in the voice that sounds like the earth itself. Then they record "Cry, Cry, Cry," driving, direct, the locomotive rhythm fully established, the voice riding it with the natural authority of someone who has found exactly the right vehicle for exactly the right cargo. Sam Phillips listens to the playback and hears what he was looking for. Not the sound of someone trying to sound like something, but the sound of something that could not sound like anything else. The records are released in 1955. They find an audience with the specific speed of music that is genuinely new, not because it has been marketed or promoted into the public consciousness, but because it is the only version of itself that exists. And people who hear it understand immediately that they have never heard anything like it. Folsom Prison Blues arrives in 1955 and is the first complete statement of what Johnny Cash is. The song is adapted from Gordon Jenkins's Crescent City Blues, heard on a record in Germany during the Air Force years. Johnny takes the melody and the general structure and writes his own lyrics. Lyrics that are, in retrospect, the most direct possible expression of the guilt and identification with the condemned that Jack's death installed in him at 12. He imagines himself as a prisoner in Folsom, watching the train go by outside the walls, hearing the whistle of freedom from inside the cage of consequence. The famous line, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die," is the most casually delivered description of casual violence in American popular music, and it is delivered in the voice that sounds like it knows what it means, in the tone that is not the performance of transgression but the direct statement of it. Sam Phillips hears it and understands that this line is going to create problems and that the problems are going to be worth it. He is right. The line becomes the most quoted lyric in Cash's catalog. It announces to everyone who hears it that this is a singer who will not sanitize the darkness, who will not manage the ugliness out of the human experience he is describing, who will look directly at the worst things people are capable of and sing about them in a voice that implies not endorsement, but understanding. Not "I approve of this." I know this exists, and I will not pretend otherwise. This is the specific quality that the prisoners who will eventually become his most devoted audience recognize immediately. The understanding that their darkness is not alien to him, that the man singing does not stand outside their experience and observe it from a safe distance, but inhabits it with the honesty of someone who knows from the inside what the outside looks like from a cage. I Walk the Line arrives in 1956 and is the counterpoint, the direct expression of the faith and the commitment, and the genuine desire to be the man that Vivian and his family and God require him to be. He writes it as a promise, a daily renewed vow to the discipline that his character requires him to maintain against the specific pulls that his character is simultaneously capable of. The tension between the Folsom Prison voice and the I Walk the Line voice is not hypocrisy. It is the most honest possible description of a person who contains both simultaneously and who understands that the containing requires daily effort. The song goes to #1 on the country charts. Johnny Cash is, at 24 years old, the most talked about new voice in American music. The success produces the specific problem that success in the music business of the 1950s reliably produces: the demand for more, delivered faster in the same format that worked the first time. Sam Phillips wants records. The promoters want shows. The radio stations want the next song. The machinery of commercial music, once it identifies something that works, does not pause to allow the person at its center the time and space that genuine creativity requires. It accelerates, and the person in the middle of it accelerates with it or gets left behind. And Johnny Cash is not the kind of person who gets left behind. He writes, he records, he tours. The output of the Sun Records years is remarkable, not just for its quality, but for its pace. The songs arriving in rapid succession, each one fully formed, each one carrying the specific stamp of the voice and the guitar rhythm and the particular emotional vocabulary that the audition discovered. He is in a period of creative flow that performers sometimes enter early in a career, when everything they have been building for years is suddenly available to them all at once, when the gift and the vehicle for the gift have found each other and the expression is effortless in the way that things are effortless when they are exactly right. But the road does not stop for creative flow. The road continues. The road follows. The relentless touring schedule that rising popularity requires, the long drives between venues in the South and the Midwest, the shows that begin at 10 in the evening and end after midnight and require a drive to the next town that arrives at dawn. The physical demands of this schedule on a young man who is already running on the specific fuel of ambition and inadequate sleep produce the first encounter with the pills. Amphetamines, speed, the specific pharmaceutical solution to the problem of needing to be awake when the body insists on sleep, available in the mid-1950s, with the ease of things that have not yet been understood to be the specific category of catastrophe that they are. They keep him awake. They keep him functioning on the long drives and through the long days that follow the long nights. They solve the immediate problem. They create the problem that will define the next decade of his life. The $1 Million Quartet session on December 4th, 1956, is the most famous accidental recording in music history, and it happens in the specific way that things that were never planned happen. Because the right people were in the same place at the same time and the tape was running. Elvis Presley, newly signed to RCA and already the most famous entertainer in America, comes back to Sun Records to visit Sam Phillips. Carl Perkins is in the studio recording. Jerry Lee Lewis, the 21-year-old piano prodigy from Louisiana whose particular combination of physical charisma and technical brilliance is in the process of setting the music world on fire, is in the building. And Johnny Cash is there. What follows is not a rehearsed session or a planned collaboration, but the spontaneous musical conversation of four young men who are all in different ways at the beginning of something extraordinary, who share the specific background of the poor rural South, the gospel music of the church, the specific hunger of people who grew up without money and are discovering that their talent is the thing that was always going to change that. They play gospel. They play country. They play the songs they know from childhood and the songs they have recently written and the songs that are in the air of the mid-1950s, American South, moving between styles with the ease of people for whom the categories are recent impositions on a musical vocabulary that has always been unified. Sam Phillips, understanding what he has, runs the tape. The recording captures something that formal sessions cannot, the specific joy of musicians discovering each other, the competitive generosity of people who are good enough to appreciate each other's gifts, the specific energy of a cultural moment in which the music they are all making is simultaneously the most exciting thing happening in American culture and something none of them fully understands yet. Johnny Cash's presence in the session is slightly different from the others. He is not the flashiest performer in the room. Elvis's charisma is overwhelming. Jerry Lee's piano playing is spectacular. Carl Perkins wrote the song they keep returning to. Cash's contribution is harder to quantify and more fundamental. The low voice grounding the harmonies, the specific moral weight of someone who carries the gospel tradition not as style, but as substance, the quality of earnestness that makes even a casual jam session feel like something, that means something. There is also, in this room on this afternoon, the specific chemistry of four young men who have all come from very similar places. The poor rural South, the church, the radio, the specific American music of people who have very little, and whose music is the most direct expression of what having very little feels like from the inside. They are not performing their backgrounds for each other, they are sharing them in the way that music always allows people to share things that ordinary speech cannot reach, and the sharing produces the specific energy of genuine recognition, the understanding that the person across from you has been somewhere similar and carries it in the same way. The tape runs for over an hour. The recording that Sam Phillips preserves is not a polished product, but a document, an accidental archive of a specific afternoon when the music of the American South was still young enough that its most gifted practitioners could gather in one room and play it together without any of them yet understanding what they were in the process of building. He leaves the session and returns to the road. The schedule does not pause for historic moments. Columbia Records comes calling in 1958 as Asishoker, the bigger label, the national distribution, the resources that Sun Records, for all its importance, cannot match. Johnny signs. The move is commercially correct and artistically complicated. Sam Phillips gave him the context in which the specific sound he developed was possible. And the move to a larger institution brings pressures and expectations that will require him to define himself against them. He defines himself by going further in the direction he has already established. The songs get darker. The identification with the condemned gets more explicit. And the pills, the amphetamines that began as a practical solution to the problem of the road, are becoming something else. A daily requirement, a dependency that is beginning to reorganize his life around its own needs rather than his. Vivian is at home in Memphis with their daughters. The road is where Johnny is, and the road is where the pills are. And the two facts are moving toward a collision that neither Vivian's prayers nor Johnny's genuine desire to be the man he promised to be can prevent. He is the biggest star in country music. He has the voice, the songs, the sound, and the face of a man who has been somewhere dark and come back with something to say about it. The darkness is getting closer. Episode 3, The Fire and the Pills. 7 arrests. A national forest burning 60 pills a day. And the cave in Tennessee where Johnny Cash crawled in to die and crawled out changed. This is Legends of America.